Some stole evidence. Some spied for foreign governments. Some tipped off gangsters about secret investigations. And others killed to keep their secrets buried. These are the corrupt FBI agents who thought they'd never get caught. Let's start with the man who turned counterintelligence into treason. Charles McGonigal. He wasn't just some agent. He was one of the top guys in the FBI, head of counterintelligence in New York. His job was to stop spies, stop foreign threats, and keep people like Russian operatives out of U.S. affairs. In 2016, when the FBI was digging into Russian interference in the U.S. election, McGonigal was leading that charge. But while he was pretending to protect the country, he was secretly making deals with the very people he was supposed to be stopping. One of those people was Oleg Deripaska, a Russian billionaire and close friend of Vladimir Putin. The U.S. had hit Deripaska with sanctions for trying to mess with American politics. But McGonigal didn't care. Instead of going after him, he secretly agreed to work for him, helped him try to dig up dirt on a rival. He used fake companies and paperwork to hide the whole thing. And that wasn't all. McGonigal also took hundreds of thousands of dollars from a former Albanian intelligence officer. He was meeting with foreign leaders, doing shady business on the side, and hiding it all from the FBI. He was living a double life: private apartments, secret trips, cash deals. He made it look clean on the outside, but underneath, it was all corruption. Eventually, it caught up to him. In 2023, McGonigal was arrested. Everything came out: how he broke U.S. sanctions, laundered money, lied to the FBI. In 2024, he was sentenced to 78 months in prison. That's over 6 years. One of the highest-ranking FBI agents in the country. And he threw it all away. But if you think that's shocking, meet Robert Hanssen, the deadliest mole in U.S. intelligence history. A devout Catholic, a family man, and a longtime FBI agent, Hanssen looked like the poster boy for loyalty. But for over 2 decades, he was secretly selling America's most guarded secrets to the Soviets and later, the Russians. His betrayal started in 1979, and by the mid-1980s, he was handing over the names of double agents, details about U.S. surveillance operations, and nuclear war strategies. The FBI suspected a mole for years, but Hanssen was careful. He never met his handlers. He used coded notes and dead drops. He even managed to frame another CIA agent, Brian Kelly, for the damage he caused. When he was finally caught in 2001, he was making a dead drop in a Virginia park. His words to the arresting agents? "What took you so long?" Hanssen pled guilty to 15 counts of espionage and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He died behind bars in 2023. His actions compromised billions of dollars in intelligence and got U.S. assets killed overseas. For years, he spied for money, but the damage he left behind was priceless. Then there was John Connolly, the Boston FBI agent whose story sounds like something out of a Scorsese movie. Connolly grew up in South Boston, just a few blocks from James Whitey Bulger, the future kingpin of the Irish mob. When Connolly joined the FBI and was assigned to Boston, he saw an opportunity. He made Bulger an informant. In return, Bulger gave up dirt on the Italian mafia. But what the FBI didn't know was that Connolly wasn't just using Bulger, he was protecting him, tipping him off about investigations, warning him about wiretaps, even helping him take out witnesses. Bulger kept dealing drugs, killing enemies, and running the streets, all while the FBI looked the other way. Connolly accepted cash, gifts, and vacations from Bulger. And when one of Bulger's associates, John Callahan, was about to flip, Connolly tipped off the mob. Callahan was found murdered, stuffed in the trunk of a car. In 2002, Connolly was convicted of racketeering. In 2008, he was convicted again, this time for second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Released in 2021 due to illness, Connolly's fall from FBI hero to mob fixer remains one of the darkest stains in bureau history. But corruption doesn't always look like espionage or murder. Sometimes it's just plain greed. Babak Broumand was an FBI agent assigned to high-level national security cases in San Francisco. From 2015 to 2018, he accepted bribes from a Beverly Hills lawyer tied to Armenian organized crime. We're talking luxury hotels, private jets, escorts, and even a Ducati motorcycle. In return, Broumand ran unauthorized searches through FBI databases and tipped off his criminal friends when they were under investigation. He even lied and claimed the lawyer was an informant just to cover his tracks. In 2023, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Another agent, another badge for sale. And then there was Mark Putnam, the first FBI agent ever convicted of killing someone while on duty. And the motive? A secret affair gone horribly wrong. In the late 1980s, Putnam was stationed in rural Kentucky investigating a bank robbery. He flipped the suspect's ex-girlfriend, Susan Smith, into becoming an informant. But their professional relationship turned intimate. Susan got pregnant, and things spiraled out of control. When Putnam returned to Kentucky after being transferred to Florida, Susan confronted him. During the argument, he strangled her to death, hid her body, and fled. A year later, overwhelmed by guilt, or maybe fear, he turned himself in. He was sentenced to 16 years in prison for manslaughter. He served 10. The FBI called it an isolated incident, but it was a first that no one wanted to believe was possible. And sometimes the betrayal doesn't come from a seasoned agent, but someone who never should have been hired in the first place. Richard Miller. He was the first FBI agent ever charged with espionage. He wasn't your typical spy. Overweight, sloppy, and often described by colleagues as a misfit, Miller still somehow made it into the Bureau's counterintelligence division. That's where he met a Russian agent named Svetlana. The two started a romantic affair, and Miller agreed to give her classified documents in exchange for gold and cash. He claimed he was acting as a double agent, trying to infiltrate the KGB. But the truth was, he was in way over his head. After a bizarre trial that lasted years, Miller was finally convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison. The real question? How did someone so obviously unqualified ever make it into the FBI in the first place? And now we get to Matthew Lowry. Young, smart, promising, assigned to a task force investigating violent drug gangs in the D.C. area. But Lowry had a secret. He was addicted to heroin. Instead of getting help, he started stealing drugs from evidence bags. He'd keep the heroin in his government-issued car, use it while on duty, and then return the bags filled with laxatives or creatine to make it look like nothing was missing. He forged paperwork, backdated files, and even faked signatures. His addiction spiraled so far that over a dozen federal drug cases had to be thrown out, and several convicted dealers walked free. In 2015, Lowry pled guilty to over 60 charges, including obstruction, falsifying records, and drug possession. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. A heartbreaking fall from grace, and a reminder that addiction can twist even the most disciplined minds into desperate decisions. But if you thought that was wild, wait until you hear about the agent who took dirty deals on 2 continents. Robert Lustyik. He was a counterintelligence specialist for the FBI. His job? Protecting America from foreign threats. But between 2011 and 2012, he was busy cutting backdoor deals with a former U.S. Special Forces soldier named Michael Taylor. Lustyik tried to stop a federal investigation into Taylor's defense contracting company in exchange for cash and business partnerships. At the same time, he was also feeding confidential FBI documents to a Bangladeshi businessman who wanted to take down a political rival back home. He promised internal reports in exchange for thousands of dollars. When payments got delayed, Lustyik threatened to out his client to the same people he was trying to destroy. In 2015, Lustyik pled guilty in 2 separate states and was sentenced to a total of 15 years behind bars. A man once trusted with guarding secrets had become a one-man black market. Some agents fall for power, others for money. But Nicholas Anthony Williams? He just liked stealing. In 2024, while working gang and counterterrorism cases in Houston, Williams started dipping into evidence during search warrants. Over 16 months, he stole thousands of dollars in cash, and in one case, silver bullion, from suspects' homes. One of his victims was a University of Houston student who had been arrested for participating in the January 6 riots. Williams swiped 2,500s and several silver bars right out of his bedroom. He didn't stop there. He used a government-issued credit card to make personal purchases and even pawned FBI-issued phones for quick cash. With every theft, Williams thought he was untouchable. In 2025, he was finally sentenced to 4 months in prison and ordered to pay back over $10,000. A slap on the wrist, maybe. But the damage was already done. Every case he touched, now under review. But some corruption is quieter and more disturbing. Robert Cesario was the lead FBI agent in a major political corruption case in Arkansas. In 2017, former State Senator John Woods was under investigation for a kickback scheme involving state funds. Cesario had crucial evidence, audio recordings that could make or break the case. But instead of preserving them, he wiped his government-issued laptop clean twice. He claimed he was protecting personal medical records. The court didn't buy it. In 2023, Cesario pleaded guilty to obstruction, but he didn't get prison. He got probation, 6 months of home confinement, and a $25,000 fine. Meanwhile, the man he helped convict is serving over 18 years. To this day, many argue Woods deserves a retrial. But the evidence is gone, and the stain of Cesario's actions still lingers. Then there's Mark Rossini, a former FBI agent who's been tangled in corruption scandals more than once. His first offense? Accessing confidential FBI databases and passing information to Hollywood actress Linda Fiorentino, who shared it with a private investigator under criminal investigation. Rossini was caught, pled guilty to misdemeanors, and resigned. But his story didn't end there. In 2022, he was back in court, this time accused of helping a Puerto Rican banker bribe the island's governor. According to prosecutors, Rossini helped funnel more than $300,000 into Wanda Vasquez's campaign in exchange for her replacing a financial regulator with someone friendly to their bank. Rossini has pled not guilty and claims it was just lobbying. The case is still ongoing, but whether he's in Washington or San Juan, Rossini's name keeps surfacing in stories of backroom deals and misused power. And then there's the tragic story of Scott M. Bowman. Assigned to the FBI's Gang Impact Team in Southern California, Bowman was supposed to be taking down violent criminals. Instead, he was looting drug busts. He stole over $136,000 in seized money and used it to buy luxury cars, including a Dodge Challenger and a Toyota Scion, and even paid for cosmetic surgery for his wife. To cover it up, he falsified records, forged receipts, and even tried to convince a fellow agent to lie. When the truth came out, it didn't just ruin his career. Prosecutors had to drop over a dozen cases he'd worked on. In 2016, he pled guilty and got 3 years in prison. But the fallout from his actions extended far beyond a jail cell. He'd blown holes in cases that took years to build. And while some agents turn corrupt for greed or power, others fall prey to something even darker: ideology. That's what prosecutors argued in the case of Terry J. Albury, an FBI agent stationed in Minneapolis. Albury was deeply troubled by what he saw as racial profiling and surveillance of minority communities. He believed internal channels weren't working, so between 2016 and 2017, he leaked over 70 classified documents to the press. Documents that exposed FBI informant recruitment practices and surveillance protocols. The Intercept published them in a series called The FBI's Secret Rules. Albury pleaded guilty to 2 counts under the Espionage Act and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He served about half that time before being released. Supporters call him a whistleblower. People say he endangered national security. Either way, his case showed a growing tension inside federal agencies between the rules and the people asked to enforce them. Then there was Matthew Lowry, an agent who, at first glance, had everything going for him. Assigned to high-stakes drug and gang investigations in the D.C. area, Lowry was young, respected, and on the rise. But privately, he battled colitis and developed an addiction to painkillers. When his prescriptions ran out, he turned to heroin, stealing it straight from FBI evidence bags. For over a year, he kept the heroin in his government car, using it while on duty and returning the evidence later, now cut with weightlifting powder or laxatives to fake the original weight. Lowry went so far as to forge signatures, backdate reports, and falsify entire chains of custody. In 2015, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over 28 criminal cases were compromised or dropped, and multiple suspects were released. The FBI called it a tragedy. But for the families of the victims and communities affected by the drugs and gangs Lowry failed to stop, it was something worse: betrayal. And finally, we come to Gordon Liddy. Not your average FBI agent. Liddy worked for the Nixon administration and helped orchestrate one of the most infamous political scandals in American history: Watergate. His role? Planning and executing illegal break-ins, surveillance, and even plotting political kidnappings. Liddy recruited a group called the Plumbers, who were caught breaking into Democratic National Committee headquarters. When they were arrested, one of them famously told the police, "We work for the same man, the president." Liddy refused to cooperate. He didn't rat anyone out, and he paid the price. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, but served just over 4. After his release, he hosted radio shows and even wrote books about his crimes. Unrepentant until the end, Liddy saw himself as a patriot, not a criminal. But history tells a different story. These aren't just one-off mistakes. They're not just isolated incidents. Thanks for watching. If these stories left you speechless or furious, let us know in the comments below. Because when the protectors become the predators, someone needs to ask the question, who's watching the watchers?